I sat in my cramped secretary cubicle as VP Marcus Williams screamed at me to refill toner cartridges and fetch his water for the third time today. The humiliation burned as coworkers pretended not to notice. I had been enduring this treatment for 2 years, watching him take credit for my innovative marketing strategies while paying me secretary wages. But today felt different. Today I discovered something that changed everything. The building ownership documents scattered across his desk revealed a shocking truth that would turn my world upside down completely. The fluorescent lights above my desk buzzed with their usual annoying hum as I gathered the quarterly reports Marcus had demanded. My name was Doreen, though he never bothered using it, preferring to bark orders at me like I was some nameless servant. The stack of papers felt heavier than usual in my trembling hands as I approached his corner office. Marcus sat behind his mahogany desk, his expensive suit jacket draped carelessly over his leather chair. At 45, he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who believed his position made him untouchable. His receding hairline glistened with sweat from his latest shouting match with the accounting department. "About time!" he growled without looking up from his computer screen. "Put those on my desk and get out. And next time, don't take forever when I need something." I placed the reports carefully on the only clear space available, trying not to disturb the scattered papers that covered every inch of his workspace. That's when I saw them, legal documents with official seals and the unmistakable letterhead of Patterson Properties. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized the name. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson was the elderly woman who owned our building, a sweet lady in her 80s who always smiled when she visited for her monthly inspections. As I turned to leave, a particular phrase caught my eye: estate settlement auction. I froze, pretending to organize the reports I'd just delivered, while my eyes quickly scanned the visible text. The words "deceased" and "immediate sale required" jumped out at me like neon signs. Mrs. Patterson was dead. "What are you still doing here?" Marcus snapped, finally glancing up from his screen. "I said get out!" "Sorry, just making sure everything was organized properly," I mumbled, backing away from his desk. But my mind was racing. Why did Marcus have these documents? Why hadn't anyone in the office been told about Mrs. Patterson's passing? Back at my cubicle, I couldn't concentrate on anything. The image of those legal papers burned in my memory. During my lunch break, instead of eating the sandwich I'd packed, I found myself walking to the public library 3 blocks away. I needed to research property auctions and estate sales without using the company computers. The librarian, a kind woman named Grace with silver hair pulled into a neat bun, helped me navigate the legal databases. What I discovered made my stomach churn. Mrs. Patterson had died 6 weeks ago. The building was scheduled for auction the following Tuesday, just 5 days away. The starting bid was listed at $250,000, significantly lower than I would have expected for a prime downtown location. I dug deeper into this public records and found something that made my blood boil. Marcus had filed several complaints with the city about supposed structural issues in our building. He'd claimed the electrical system was outdated, the plumbing needed major repairs, and the foundation showed signs of settling. None of these problems actually existed. I'd worked in this building for 2 years and knew every creaky floorboard and humming light fixture. The building was solid. My father had been in real estate before his death 3 years ago, and he'd taught me to read property assessments and building inspections. Marcus was deliberately spreading false information to drive down the building's perceived value and scare away potential bidders. That afternoon, I could barely focus on my tasks. Every time Marcus barked an order, every time he dismissed my suggestions with a condescending wave, I thought about those auction documents. When 5 o'clock finally arrived, I stayed behind, pretending to finish up some filing. The office grew quiet as the last employees trickled out. Marcus was still in his office door, slightly ajar. I could hear him on the phone, his voice lower than usual, but still carrying that unmistakable tone of smugness. "The auction is Tuesday," he was saying. "I've made sure there won't be much competition. Who's going to want a building with so many problems the electrical alone will cost a fortune to fix?" My hands clenched into fists as I listened. "Once I own the building, I can triple the rent on all these tenants. Half of them will move out, which is perfect. I'll bring in some high-end corporate clients who can actually afford premium rates. This little investment is going to make me a very wealthy man." The phone conversation continued, but I'd heard enough. Marcus wasn't just stealing my ideas and treating me like dirt. He was planning to buy our building and force everyone out with impossible rent increases. The small businesses on the ground floor, the nonprofit organization on the second level, even our own company. Everyone would be displaced, so Marcus could line his pockets. I quietly gathered my things and left the building, my mind spinning with possibilities I'd never dared consider before. The evening air felt crisp against my face as I walked home to my small apartment, but for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Marcus's latest insult or impossible demand. I was thinking about that $250,000 starting bid. That night I pulled out the shoebox I kept under my bed. Inside were the financial documents from my father's life insurance policy, my modest savings account statements, and the investment portfolio he'd helped me start during college. I'd been too heartbroken after his death to pay much attention to money, but now I spread everything across my kitchen table and started calculating. The life insurance money, which I'd never touched, amounted to $180,000. My savings account held another $43,000 from 2 years of living frugally and avoiding any unnecessary expenses. The investment portfolio had grown to nearly $60,000. I had almost $300,000 available. More importantly, I had something Marcus didn't know. I possessed a business degree from State University with a concentration in commercial real estate. During college, my father had insisted I intern with his property management company every summer. I knew how to read building inspections, understand zoning laws, and evaluate investment potential. This building was worth far more than $250,000. The location alone made it valuable, sitting just 4 blocks from the courthouse and surrounded by professional offices and retail spaces. Marcus was trying to steal it through deception and manipulation, but I could stop him. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. I'd spent 2 years letting Marcus walk all over me, accepting his abuse because I needed the job and didn't believe I deserved better. But now, facing the possibility of actually fighting back, I felt something I hadn't experienced since my father's death hope. As I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by financial documents, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to that auction, and I was going to bid against Marcus Williams. Even if I lost, even if he somehow outbid me, at least he would know that someone was watching. Someone knew what he was really doing. The fluorescent light above my kitchen table hummed just like the ones at work. But tonight the sound didn't annoy me. Tonight it sounded like the beginning of something new. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching the nervous energy that had kept me tossing and turning all night. I arrived at work 15 minutes early, something I'd never done before, and used the time to study the building with fresh eyes. The lobby's marble floors were worn but well-maintained. The brass mailboxes gleamed from regular polishing. The elevator operated smoothly, and the hallways showed no signs of the structural problems Marcus had reported to the city. Jake Patterson arrived at 9:30, carrying a briefcase and wearing the tired expression of someone dealing with estate complications. As Mrs. Patterson's nephew and executor, he'd been managing the building sale while grieving his aunt's passing. I intercepted him near the elevator, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Mr. Patterson, I'm Doreen. I work on the 4th floor. I wanted to express my condolences about your aunt. She was always so kind to everyone here." His weathered face softened. "Thank you. Aunt Eleanor really cared about this place and the people in it. That's why this sale is so difficult. I want to make sure the building goes to someone who'll treat the tenants fairly." I took a deep breath and dove in. "I'm actually interested in attending the auction. Could you tell me more about the process?" Jake's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You want to bid on the building?" "That's wonderful. Aunt Eleanor always said the best landlords were people who understood what it was like to be tenants first." We talked for 20 minutes about the auction procedures, required deposits, and financing options. Jake mentioned that several complaints had been filed about building conditions, which puzzled him since his aunt had always maintained the property meticulously. When I described Marcus's false reports, Jake's expression darkened. "That explains a lot. I've been wondering why some potential investors backed out after initial interest. Someone's been spreading misinformation deliberately." After Jake left, I knew I needed professional help. During my lunch break, I called my college roommate Sarah, who'd become a commercial loan officer at First National Bank. We'd lost touch after graduation, but I remembered her saying she specialized in helping first-time property investors. "Doreen, what a surprise!" Sarah's voice bubbled with enthusiasm when she answered. "I was just thinking about you the other day. How are you doing?" After catching up briefly, I explained my situation. Sarah listened intently, asking detailed questions about the property value, my financial position, and my experience with real estate. "There's actually a special loan program for first-time commercial property buyers," she said. "With your down payment amount and your father's background in real estate, you'd be a strong candidate. Can you come in tomorrow afternoon? I'll pull together some preliminary numbers." The rest of the week passed in a blur of clandestine research and careful observation. I discovered that Marcus had been systematically undermining building operations in subtle ways. He'd canceled regular maintenance appointments, claiming budget constraints. He'd discouraged other tenants from reporting minor repairs, telling them the building's financial situation was precarious. He'd even spread rumors about potential safety violations that didn't exist. During coffee breaks and casual conversations, I began talking with other employees about their experiences. Tom from accounting mentioned that Marcus had been pressuring him to find unnecessary budget cuts. Jennifer from marketing revealed that Marcus had been forwarding client complaints directly to upper management without trying to resolve them first. Carlos from maintenance said he'd been ordered to defer several routine repairs that could make the building appear neglected. None of them realized they were providing pieces of a larger puzzle. Marcus wasn't just planning to buy the building. He'd been systematically sabotaging operations to justify his eventual rent increases and tenant displacement. My meeting with Sarah went better than I'd dared hope. The loan program required only 20% down, which I could easily cover. My credit score was excellent, and my father's reputation in the real estate community still carried weight with local lenders. Sarah projected that I could secure financing for up to $400,000 if needed. "The beautiful thing about commercial real estate," Sarah explained as we reviewed the loan documents, "is that you can often improve the property value significantly through better management and tenant relations. If this Marcus character has been running the building poorly, you could probably increase its profitability just by treating people decently." Thursday afternoon, I made another crucial discovery. While organizing Marcus's files for a client presentation, I found copies of correspondence he'd been having with the regional director, David Harrison. Marcus had been painting a picture of declining employee morale and productivity, suggesting that our office location was partly to blame. He'd recommended relocating to a more prestigious address once budget allowed. What he hadn't mentioned was that he'd been the primary cause of declining morale through his abusive management style. He certainly hadn't shared that our team consistently exceeded performance targets despite his interference. I photocopied the relevant documents, being careful to return everything exactly as I'd found it. Marcus's paranoia had been increasing all week. He'd started questioning employees about their tasks more aggressively and had installed a small security camera pointed at his office door. He knew someone was investigating him, but he hadn't figured out who. Friday evening, I stayed late again, waiting for the office to empty. This time, I wasn't just eavesdropping on Marcus's phone calls. I was documenting everything. Using my phone, I carefully photographed expense reports that showed personal charges being attributed to business accounts. I found invoices for expensive meals and entertainment that Marcus had labeled as client development, though I knew for certain no clients had been present. Most damaging of all, I discovered a folder containing my original marketing proposals from the past 18 months. Each one had been retyped with Marcus's name as the author before being submitted to upper management. My ideas for improving client retention, streamlining project workflows, and expanding our service offerings had all been stolen and presented as his innovations. The elevator dinged softly as I prepared to leave, and panic shot through me. Had someone seen the lights on and come to investigate, I quickly shut off my phone's flashlight and crept toward the reception area to see who might be arriving. It was David Harrison, the regional director. He walked purposefully toward Marcus's office, used a master key to enter, and began examining the same files I'd been photographing. Clearly, I wasn't the only one who'd been investigating Marcus's activities. I waited in the break room until David finished his inspection and left the building. Then I went home and spent the weekend preparing for the auction that would take place in just 3 days. Sunday night, I called Jake Patterson to confirm my registration for the auction. He sounded pleased to hear I was still planning to bid, especially after I mentioned some of the irregularities I'd uncovered about the building's recent management. "Aunt Eleanor would have been furious," Jake said. "She believed property ownership was a responsibility, not just an investment opportunity. She always said the best landlords were people who remembered what it felt like to worry about rent." As I hung up the phone, I realized I wasn't just trying to buy a building anymore. I was carrying on Mrs. Patterson's legacy of treating tenants with dignity and respect. More than that, I was finally standing up to the bully who'd been making my life miserable for 2 years. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. Monday morning brought an unexpected development that nearly derailed my entire plan. I arrived at work to find Marcus pacing around the office like a caged animal, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and his tie askew. He'd installed 2 additional security cameras over the weekend, positioned to monitor the main workspace and the file room. "Someone's been going through confidential documents," he announced to the assembled staff during our morning meeting. "I want everyone to know that I take corporate security very seriously. Anyone caught accessing files without authorization will be terminated immediately." His eyes swept across the room, lingering on each face, as if he could detect guilt through pure intimidation. When his gaze landed on me, I forced myself to maintain steady eye contact while my heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't afford to give myself away now, not when I was so close to the auction. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "I've become aware that some employees have been discussing confidential business matters with outsiders. This is completely unacceptable. From now on, any communication with vendors, contractors, or building management must go through me directly." Tom from accounting shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Jennifer doodled nervously on her notepad. Carlos stared at his hands with the resigned expression of someone who dealt with too many unreasonable bosses. Nobody spoke up, but the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. After the meeting, Marcus pulled me aside with a grip that was unnecessarily firm on my elbow. "I need you to cancel all maintenance appointments for this week. Tell them we're reviewing our service contracts and will reschedule soon." "But the quarterly HVAC inspection is scheduled for Wednesday," I protested. "If we cancel now, they might not be able to reschedule for months." "Did I ask for your opinion?" Marcus's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Cancel the appointments. All of them. And if anyone asks why, you tell them to speak with me directly." I nodded and returned to my desk, but my mind was racing. Marcus was deliberately sabotaging building maintenance just days before the auction. He wanted any potential bidders to see problems that would justify his lowball offers. The man was absolutely ruthless. During my lunch break, I met with Linda Rodriguez, the commercial real estate attorney Sarah had recommended. Linda's office occupied the top floor of a converted Victorian house 6 blocks from our building, and her warm smile immediately put me at ease. "Sarah filled me in on your situation," Linda said as we settled into comfortable chairs near her window. "This is exactly the kind of case that makes me love what I do. Small business owner stands up to corporate bully. It's like a modern David and Goliath story." Linda explained the legal implications of property ownership transfer. As the new owner, I would have the right to terminate any existing management contracts with 30 days' notice. I could also choose which tenants to retain and which leases to honor, though she strongly advised maintaining good relationships with current renters. "The key thing to understand," Linda emphasized, "is that ownership gives you tremendous power to reshape how this building operates. If your current boss has been cutting corners on maintenance and mistreating tenants, you can reverse all of that immediately." She also warned me about potential retaliation from Marcus. Men like him don't handle losing gracefully, especially when they're beaten by someone they've been underestimating. You'll need to be prepared for him to challenge the sale or try to make trouble for you professionally. That afternoon, I made another covert call to David Harrison's assistant, claiming I needed to verify some budget figures for a client report. During the conversation, I casually mentioned concerns about building maintenance and whether our lease arrangement was secure long-term. The assistant, Gloria, was surprisingly forthcoming. "Between you and me," Gloria said in a lowered voice, "Mr. Harrison has been asking a lot of questions about your office lately. He's particularly interested in employee satisfaction and productivity trends. I think there might be some changes coming." Perfect. David was conducting his own investigation into Marcus's performance. That meant I wasn't the only one who'd noticed problems with his management style. Tuesday evening, less than 24 hours before the auction, I drove by the courthouse to familiarize myself with the parking situation and building layout. The auction would take place in Conference Room B at 10 o'clock sharp. I planned to arrive early, scope out the competition, and position myself strategically. On my way home, I stopped at a hair salon I'd never visited before. The stylist, a chatty woman named Brenda with purple streaks in her blonde hair, worked magic with some temporary color and strategic styling. When she finished, I looked like a completely different person. My usually straight brown hair now had subtle highlights and waves that framed my face differently. Combined with a professional suit I'd borrowed from my neighbor and glasses I didn't normally wear, I was confident Marcus wouldn't recognize me at first glance. The final piece of my preparation involved calling in sick Tuesday morning. I'd never used a fake illness day in my entire 2 years at the company, so my absence wouldn't raise immediate suspicion. I told Marcus's assistant I had food poisoning and would probably need the rest of the week to recover. At 9:15 on Tuesday morning, I sat in my car outside the courthouse, running through my bidding strategy one final time. Sarah had advised me to set a maximum bid of $320,000, enough to outbid most casual investors, but not so high that I'd overextend myself financially. Linda had reminded me to stay calm and not let emotions drive my decisions. But as I watched Marcus stride confidently up the courthouse steps, wearing his most expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than I made in a month, I felt something deeper than strategy or calculation. I felt righteous anger. For 2 years, this man had stolen my ideas, undermined my confidence, and treated me like I was beneath his notice. He'd built his success on the backs of people he considered disposable, including Mrs. Patterson, whose building he was trying to acquire through deception and manipulation. Today that was going to end. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one more time. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the timid secretary who'd been refilling toner cartridges just days earlier. This woman had steel in her eyes and determination in her jaw. This woman was ready for war. At 9:45, I walked through the courthouse's heavy oak doors with my head held high and my documentation folder tucked securely under my arm. The building's interior marble columns and vaulted ceilings gave the space a sense of gravity that matched the importance of what was about to happen. My borrowed heels clicked confidently across the polished floor as I navigated toward Conference Room B. The auction room was smaller than I'd expected, with perhaps 30 folding chairs arranged in neat rows facing a podium. About 15 people had already arrived, most of them middle-aged men in business suits, examining property listings and talking quietly among themselves. I recognized 2 local developers from photos I'd seen in the newspaper, plus several people who looked like real estate agents or property investors. Marcus sat in the front row, his posture radiating confidence. He'd positioned himself where he could see everyone who entered and monitor the competition. His expensive pen tapped rhythmically against his leather portfolio as his eyes swept the room, cataloging potential threats to his plan. I chose a seat 3 rows behind him and slightly to the left, close enough to observe his reactions, but far enough away to avoid immediate recognition. My hairstyling and borrowed glasses were working perfectly. Marcus had glanced at me twice without any sign of recognition. At exactly 10 o'clock, Robert Daniels, the court-appointed auctioneer, stepped up to the podium. He was a tall, thin man with silver hair and the practiced authority of someone who'd conducted hundreds of similar proceedings. His voice carried clearly throughout the room as he explained the bidding process and payment requirements. The property at 426 West Commerce Street consists of a 5-story mixed-use building containing approximately 12,000 square feet of rentable space, Daniels announced. Current tenants include professional offices, a nonprofit organization, and street-level retail. The building has been maintained in good condition with recent updates to plumbing and electrical systems. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The auctioneer's description contradicted the narrative of neglect and structural problems Marcus had been spreading. Several potential bidders nodded approvingly and made notes in their folders. Bidding will start at $250,000. Do I hear $250,000? Marcus's hand shot up immediately. $250,000. A woman in a navy blue suit raised her hand. $275,000. A man near the back called out $300,000. Marcus's head swiveled to identify this unexpected competition. His face flushed slightly as he realized he wasn't going to acquire the building unchallenged. $325,000, he said, his voice tight with tension. I waited, watching the bidding climb steadily. My strategy was to stay out of the early rounds and let other bidders drive up the price while revealing their maximum limits. Marcus was becoming more agitated with each competing bid, clearly having expected minimal resistance to his plans. $350,000, called the woman in navy. $375,000, countered the man from the back row. Marcus hesitated for the first time, his pen tapping faster against his portfolio. $400,000. Several bidders dropped out at this point, shaking their heads and gathering their materials. The woman in navy made one more attempt, 425. When the back row bidder declined to continue, Marcus smiled smugly. He thought he'd scared off the serious competition. The auction room grew quieter as the remaining participants realized they were watching a two-person race between Marcus and the navy-suited woman. That's when I raised my hand for the first time. $450,000. The impact was immediate and electric. Marcus spun around so quickly he nearly dropped his portfolio, his eyes searching the room frantically to identify this new threat. When his gaze passed over me, I could see him trying to place my face. The styled hair and borrowed glasses were creating just enough doubt to prevent immediate recognition. 475, the navy-suited woman called, but she sounded less confident now. Marcus was sweating visibly. 500,000. I let the tension build for a moment, studying my documentation folder as if calculating my financial limits. In reality, I was watching Marcus's body language and noting how his confidence had evaporated. He'd planned for a quick, easy purchase. This public bidding war was exposing him to scrutiny he'd never intended. $525,000, I said calmly. The woman in navy shook her head and sat back in her chair. She was done. It was now just Marcus and me, exactly as I'd hoped. 550, Marcus said through gritted teeth. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the room's comfortable temperature. 575. 600,000. Marcus's voice cracked slightly on the final word. I paused again, letting him think he might have reached my limit. The auctioneer looked at me expectantly. Do I hear 625? $625,000, I confirmed. Marcus turned around fully now, staring directly at me with narrowed eyes. Recognition was beginning to dawn, but he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. His secretary, the woman he'd been abusing and dismissing for 2 years, couldn't possibly be the person driving up his costs and threatening his plans. Sir, the auctioneer prompted Marcus. The bid stands at 625. Marcus's hands were shaking slightly as he gripped his portfolio. 650. 675, I responded immediately. 700,000! Marcus's voice rose loud enough to echo off the conference room walls. Several people turned to stare at him, their expressions ranging from curious to disapproving of his outburst. I took a deep breath and made my final calculation. Marcus was reaching his limit. I could see it in his panicked movements and hear it in his increasingly desperate tone. Time to end this. $701,000. The room fell silent, except for the scratch of pens, as reporters and observers made notes. Marcus stared at me with his mouth hanging open, finally recognizing the woman who'd been bringing him coffee and organizing his files. His face cycled through disbelief, rage, and something that might have been fear. Sir, the auctioneer waited patiently. Do I hear 705? Marcus looked at his portfolio, then at his bank documents, then back at me. His hands were trembling openly now. I need a moment to. Going once at $701,000. Wait. Marcus half stood his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. 705. $710,000, I said immediately. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his face went completely white. He fumbled to answer the call, his voice barely audible as he spoke to whoever was on the other end. Going twice at $710,000, the auctioneer announced. Marcus ended his call and slowly sank back into his chair. When he looked at me again, his expression had changed completely. The arrogance and smugness were gone, replaced by something that looked remarkably like defeat. Sold to bidder number 18 for $710,000, the auctioneer declared, bringing his gavel down with a sharp crack that echoed through the suddenly quiet room. As I stood to approach the payment table, Marcus's phone rang again. This time I was close enough to hear both sides of the conversation. Williams, this is David Harrison. I need you in my office immediately. We have some serious issues to discuss regarding your conduct and your expense reports. Don't bother coming back to the building first. Just come straight to headquarters. Marcus looked up at me as I passed his row, his face a mixture of shock and growing realization. Doreen, he whispered. I paused and looked down at him with the calmest smile I could manage. Hello, Marcus. Congratulations on your new career opportunities. The woman in the navy suit approached me as I completed my paperwork. Brilliant strategy, she said admiringly. I'm Catherine Mills from Mills Development. If you ever decide to sell, please give me a call. 20 minutes later, I walked out of the courthouse as the legal owner of 426 West Commerce Street. The building where I'd been treated like a servant now belonged to me completely. More importantly, Marcus Williams no longer had any power over my life or anyone else's. As I sat in my car processing what had just happened, my phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. "How did it go?" I typed back, "I won and I think Marcus just got fired." Her response came immediately. "I'm buying the champagne. Tell me everything." But first, I had somewhere else to be. It was time to return to work. Not as Marcus's secretary, but as his new landlord. Wednesday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that made everything feel possible. I woke up at 5:30, 2 hours earlier than usual, and spent extra time getting ready for what would undoubtedly be the most important workday of my life. Instead of my typical blouse and skirt combination, I chose a tailored navy suit I'd bought for job interviews but never worn. I styled my hair in a professional updo and applied makeup with more care than I'd taken in months. Today, I wasn't going to work as Marcus Williams' secretary. Today, I was going to work as the building owner. I arrived at 426 West Commerce Street at 7:15 using the new keys Jake Patterson had given me the previous evening. The lobby felt different, knowing I owned every marble tile, every brass fixture, every inch of space from the basement storage areas to the rooftop mechanical equipment. This was my building now, and I had plans for it. My first stop was the basement, where I met Carlos Rivera, the maintenance supervisor Marcus had been undermining for months. Carlos was a skilled craftsman in his 50s who took genuine pride in keeping the building functioning smoothly. When I explained my new role and my plans for improving building operations, his weathered face broke into the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in weeks. "Miss Doreen, this is the best news I've heard all year," Carlos said as we walked through the mechanical rooms. "I've got a list of maintenance items Mr. Williams kept rejecting, simple things that would make this place run better and save money long term. He never wanted to listen." We spent an hour going through his suggestions: new LED lighting for the stairwells, updated weather stripping for better energy efficiency, a preventive maintenance schedule for the elevators. Nothing expensive or complicated, just the kind of sensible upkeep that made properties more valuable over time. "Carlos might want you to implement everything on this list," I told him. "Order whatever supplies you need and schedule the work. You're the expert here, and I trust your judgment completely." The transformation in his demeanor was immediate. For months, Marcus had treated Carlos like an inconvenience, someone whose requests for basic maintenance were annoying interruptions. Now Carlos was being asked for his professional opinion and given authority to make necessary improvements. At 8:30, I positioned myself in the lobby to intercept employees as they arrived for work. My goal was to schedule an all-hands meeting for 9:15, giving everyone time to settle in while building anticipation for my announcement. I also wanted to observe reactions as word spread that something significant was happening. Jennifer from marketing was the first to arrive, looking puzzled when she saw me waiting near the elevator bank. "Doreen, what are you doing down here? Are you feeling better? We heard you had food poisoning." "Much better, thank you. Could you please let everyone know we're having a mandatory meeting in the conference room at 9:15. It's very important that everyone attend." Tom from accounting arrived a few minutes later, followed by the rest of our office staff. Each person received the same message about the meeting, and I could see curiosity building as they exchanged glances and whispered questions. Nobody had any idea what was coming. At exactly 9 o'clock, 3 black sedans pulled up to the building's front entrance. David Harrison emerged from the first vehicle, accompanied by Patricia Moore from Human Resources and 2 security guards I didn't recognize. From the second car came FBI agent Susan Walker, whom I'd spoken with the previous evening about Marcus's financial irregularities. The third vehicle contained 2 additional agents and someone from the district attorney's office. This was going to be even more dramatic than I'd planned. I met David Harrison in the lobby and introduced myself as the building's new owner. His surprise was evident, but he recovered quickly and extended his hand with a firm handshake. "Ms. Patterson mentioned you might be involved in the auction," David said. "Congratulations on your purchase. I assume you're aware of the situation with Mr. Williams?" "I'm aware of several situations involving Mr. Williams," I replied carefully. "I believe we need to have a comprehensive discussion about his conduct and its impact on both the building operations and your company's productivity." We rode the elevator to the 4th floor together, and I could feel the energy building as we approached what would certainly be Marcus's final confrontation. Agent Walker had explained that they'd been building a case against Marcus for weeks, using the evidence I'd provided, plus their own investigation into his financial activities. The office was buzzing with nervous energy when we arrived. Marcus hadn't appeared yet, which wasn't unusual since he typically arrived between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. I used the extra time to position everyone strategically for maximum impact. At 9:12, Marcus burst through the office doors, his hair disheveled and his usually perfect appearance showing signs of a sleepless night. He'd obviously been drinking. I could smell alcohol from across the room, and his movements had the exaggerated precision of someone trying to hide impairment. "What the hell is going on here?" Marcus demanded, his voice echoing through the office. "Why are there strangers in my building, and why isn't everyone at their desks working?" That's when he noticed David Harrison standing near the conference room entrance. Marcus's face went through a rapid series of expressions: confusion, recognition, concern, and finally something approaching panic. "David, I wasn't expecting you today. If I'd known you were coming, I would have prepared a presentation about our quarterly numbers. They're really quite impressive despite some challenges with our current location." David's expression remained professionally neutral. "Mr. Williams, we need to discuss several urgent matters regarding your management practices and financial conduct. I suggest we use the conference room." Marcus's eyes darted around the office, finally landing on me. This time, recognition was immediate and complete. His face flushed red as he processed the implications of my presence alongside law enforcement and company executives. "You," he said, pointing a trembling finger in my direction. "You did this somehow. I don't know how, but you're behind this." "Actually," I said, stepping forward with more confidence than I'd ever felt in his presence, "I'm here as the building's new owner. We need to discuss your lease arrangement and conduct standards for tenants in my property." The conference room had never felt smaller as we all gathered around the polished table. Marcus took his usual seat at the head, but this time David Harrison positioned himself directly across from him. Agent Walker sat to David's right, her badge clearly visible. I chose a chair where I could observe Marcus's reactions while staying close enough to provide input when needed. "Mr. Williams," David began, "we've received numerous reports about your conduct in this office. Additionally, our accounting department has identified irregularities in expense reports and budget allocations under your supervision." Agent Walker opened her folder and placed several documents on the table. "We're also investigating allegations of embezzlement, fraudulent expense reporting, and potential securities violations related to your attempts to manipulate property values for personal gain." Marcus's face went completely white. His hands started shaking so violently he had to clasp them together to maintain any semblance of composure. "I don't understand. There must be some mistake. I've always followed proper procedures." "Mr. Williams," I said quietly, "would you like to explain why you filed false reports with the city about this building's structural condition? Or why you've been charging personal expenses to company accounts? Or perhaps why you've been stealing my marketing proposals and presenting them as your own work?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus looked around the table, desperately searching for support or escape routes that simply didn't exist. When he realized that everyone in the room was waiting for his response, his composure finally cracked completely. "This is ridiculous!" he shouted, standing so abruptly that his chair rolled backward into the wall. "I've been with this company for 12 years. I've built this department from nothing. You can't destroy my career based on lies from some disgruntled secretary." Patricia Moore spoke for the first time. "Mr. Williams, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building after you surrender all company property, including your keys, credit cards, and electronic devices." Furthermore, Agent Walker added, "You're under investigation for multiple federal crimes. I strongly advise you to contact an attorney immediately." Marcus's legs gave out, and he collapsed back into his chair. The arrogance and bullying that had defined his management style were gone, replaced by the hollow-eyed stare of someone whose world had just disintegrated. As security prepared to escort Marcus from the building, he looked at me one final time. "How?" he whispered. I stood up and walked to where he sat slumped in defeat. For 2 years, this man had made me feel small, worthless, and powerless. He'd stolen my ideas, crushed my confidence, and treated me like I was beneath his notice. Now he was asking me to explain how his victim had become his downfall. "You taught me everything I needed to know about bad leadership," I said calmly. "The rest was just paperwork." Security escorted Marcus from the conference room through the office, where his former employees watched in stunned silence, and out of the building he'd tried to steal. As the elevator doors closed behind him, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders that I'd been carrying for longer than I'd realized. The building was mine. Marcus was gone, And for the first time in 2 years, I could breathe freely in my own workplace. 3 weeks after Marcus's dramatic exit, I stood in what had been his corner office, now completely transformed into a bright, welcoming space. The heavy mahogany desk had been replaced with a modern glass-topped table. The intimidating leather chairs were gone, replaced by comfortable seating that encouraged collaboration rather than confrontation. Sunlight streamed through windows that had been cleaned for the first time in months, illuminating fresh flowers Carlos had brought up from the lobby planters. This office now belonged to Jennifer Walsh, our newly promoted marketing director. She'd been the obvious choice to replace Marcus, combining genuine expertise with the kind of leadership style that inspired rather than terrorized. The transformation in the entire department's energy since her promotion had been remarkable. "I still can't believe this is really happening," Jennifer said, as we reviewed the department's restructuring plan. "6 months ago, I was afraid to suggest new ideas because Marcus would either steal them or shoot them down. Now you're asking me to completely reimagine how we operate." The changes extended far beyond personnel decisions. Using the building's improved rental income, generated by treating tenants fairly and maintaining the property properly, I'd been able to implement profit-sharing bonuses for all employees. Tom from accounting, now our finance manager, had calculated that productivity was up 37% since the management transition. Carlos had become our building operations director, overseeing not just maintenance, but also tenant relations and property improvements. His comprehensive renovation plan was increasing the building's value while creating a more pleasant environment for everyone who worked there. The LED lighting project alone was saving enough on electricity bills to fund quarterly employee appreciation events. My own role had evolved in ways I'd never imagined. David Harrison had offered me Marcus's former position as vice president, recognizing the leadership skills I'd demonstrated throughout the transition. Instead, I'd negotiated a unique arrangement that allowed me to split my time between building management and developing innovative marketing strategies for the company. "The beautiful thing about owning your own workplace," I told Jennifer during one of our weekly planning sessions, "is that you can create the kind of environment where everyone succeeds. When people feel valued and respected, they produce their best work naturally." The ripple effects were extending throughout the professional community. Other employees from nearby buildings had started approaching me about potential job opportunities, having heard about our positive workplace culture. Local business organizations had invited me to speak about property management and employee relations. The building itself had become a case study in how treating people fairly could improve both morale and profitability. On Thursday afternoon, Agent Walker called with an update on Marcus's legal situation. The FBI's investigation had uncovered a pattern of financial fraud extending back nearly 5 years. Marcus had been systematically overcharging clients, padding expense accounts, and skimming money from various departmental budgets. The total amount of his embezzlement exceeded $200,000. "He's also being charged with conspiracy to commit real estate fraud," Agent Walker explained. "His attempt to manipulate the building auction through false reporting constitutes deliberate deception for financial gain. The district attorney is confident about securing convictions on multiple counts." More importantly, for my own peace of mind, the investigation had revealed that Marcus had been stealing my ideas and proposals almost from my first week on the job. The FBI had recovered dozens of documents showing original work I'd created being resubmitted under his name. This evidence would be crucial in establishing the pattern of workplace abuse that had defined my experience as his employee. Friday brought an unexpected visitor that reminded me why all these changes mattered so much. Mrs. Patterson's neighbor, an elderly gentleman named Frank Morrison, stopped by to thank me for maintaining the building's character while improving its operations. "Eleanor always worried about what would happen to this place after she was gone," Frank told me as we walked through the renovated lobby. "She loved the fact that small businesses and nonprofit organizations could afford to rent here. She was terrified that some developer would buy it and force everyone out with impossible rent increases." Frank's words hit me harder than I'd expected. Mrs. Patterson had built something meaningful with this property, a place where people could pursue their professional dreams without being crushed by overwhelming overhead costs. Marcus had planned to destroy that legacy for personal profit. By stopping him, I'd preserved something much more important than just a building. That weekend, I found myself back in the courthouse, this time for a much happier occasion. Jake Patterson was officially transferring the property deed, completing the final paperwork that made me the legal owner of 426 West Commerce Street. As I signed the documents, Jake shared more stories about his aunt's vision for the building. She always said the best landlords were people who remembered what it felt like to struggle, Jake said as we completed the paperwork. People who understood that a roof over your business isn't just about square footage. It's about having a foundation for building something meaningful. The following week brought news that validated every decision I'd made. David Harrison announced that our office had been selected as the company's regional model for employee satisfaction and productivity improvement. Teams from other locations would be visiting to study our management practices and workplace culture initiatives. "What you've accomplished here goes far beyond just removing a problematic manager," David explained during our monthly review meeting. "You've demonstrated that treating employees with dignity and respect isn't just morally right, it's also incredibly profitable." The numbers supported his assessment. Client retention was at an all-time high. Employee turnover had dropped to 0. Project completion times had improved by 23%. Most importantly, our team was generating innovative solutions and creative approaches that other departments were adopting company-wide. Carlos had been particularly instrumental in this transformation. His building maintenance expertise, combined with newfound authority to implement improvements, had created an environment where everyone felt proud of their workplace. The fresh paint, improved lighting, and attention to detail sent a clear message. This was a place where people's comfort and well-being mattered. On the 1-month anniversary of Marcus's termination, I received a letter that provided perfect closure to the most difficult chapter of my professional life. The return address showed it came from the federal correctional facility where Marcus was being held pending trial. Inside was a handwritten note that was both an apology and an admission of guilt. Marcus acknowledged stealing my ideas, manipulating building records, and creating a hostile work environment. He admitted that his behavior had been driven by insecurity and fear of being exposed as incompetent. Most significantly, he expressed genuine remorse for the damage he'd caused to both the building's tenants and the company's employees. I read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. Marcus's acknowledgement of his mistakes was gratifying, but my focus was entirely on the future now. The past was over. What mattered was building something better for everyone who depended on this workplace for their livelihood. That evening, I stood on the building's rooftop, looking out over the city lights, and reflecting on everything that had changed. 6 weeks ago, I'd been a powerless secretary, being abused by a corrupt boss who seemed untouchable. Tonight, I was a building owner, department leader, and advocate for workplace dignity who'd helped create an environment where everyone could thrive. The view from the top was everything I'd hoped it would be. 6 months later, I stood before 200 business leaders at the Regional Chamber of Commerce's annual conference, looking out at faces that ranged from curious to skeptical. The keynote speech I was about to deliver had been requested specifically because word had spread throughout the professional community about the transformation at 426 West Commerce Street. "Good morning. My name is Doreen, and 18 months ago I was a secretary being screamed at for not refilling toner cartridges fast enough. Today I own the building where I work, and I'm here to talk about how workplace dignity isn't just morally necessary, it's also incredibly profitable." The audience's attention was immediate and complete. In a room full of executives and managers, the story of an employee fighting back against abusive leadership resonated in ways I hadn't fully expected. I told them about Marcus's systematic abuse, his theft of employee ideas, and his plan to manipulate the building auction for personal gain. I described the investigation process, the evidence gathering, and the moment when everything came together at the courthouse auction. Most importantly, I shared the results we'd achieved by treating employees as valuable human beings rather than disposable resources. Our productivity increased 37% simply by creating an environment where people felt safe to contribute their best ideas. Client retention improved dramatically because employees who feel valued provide better customer service naturally. We eliminated turnover completely because people want to work in places where their contributions are recognized and respected. During the question and answer session, a woman near the front raised her hand. "What happened to your former boss? Did he face any consequences for his behavior?" Marcus Williams was convicted on 14 counts of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. He's currently serving a 7-year federal sentence. More importantly, the employees he abused are now thriving in an environment where their talents are recognized and developed. Another questioner asked about the financial aspects of my building purchase. I explained the loan program Sarah had helped me navigate, the legal framework Linda Rodriguez had provided, and the due diligence process that made the investment successful. The key insight I emphasized is that treating tenants and employees fairly isn't just the right thing to do, it's also the most profitable approach in the long run. When people feel secure and valued, they invest their energy in making the organization succeed rather than just protecting themselves from abuse. After my presentation, I was approached by dozens of business owners who wanted to discuss implementing similar changes in their own organizations. Several women shared stories of workplace abuse they'd endured, expressing gratitude for seeing an example of someone who'd successfully fought back. The most meaningful conversation came from a young man named David, who worked as an assistant at a law firm. His boss had been stealing his research and presenting it as original work, while simultaneously undermining David's confidence through constant criticism and impossible demands. "I feel like I'm trapped," David told me during the networking reception. "I need this job, but it's destroying my self-esteem." "How did you find the courage to fight back?" "The courage came when I realized I had a choice," I replied. I could continue accepting abuse and let it define my life, or I could take action to change my situation. The first step was documenting everything and seeking help from people with expertise I didn't have. The second step was recognizing that I deserved better treatment, regardless of my position in the company hierarchy. I gave David contact information for Linda Rodriguez and Sarah, along with specific advice about documenting workplace abuse and building support networks. 3 months later, he sent me an update. His boss had been terminated for misconduct, and David had been promoted to a position where his research skills were properly recognized and compensated. The transformation at our building continued expanding beyond anything I'd originally envisioned. The nonprofit organization on the second floor had grown their staff by 40%, using the space more efficiently now that building management was responsive to their needs. The retail businesses on the ground floor were thriving because Carlos maintained their spaces properly, and I kept rent increases reasonable. Most significantly, our office had become a training center for other company locations. Managers from across the region visited regularly to observe our workplace culture and implementation strategies. Jennifer had developed a comprehensive manual for creating positive employee relations, which was being distributed company-wide as the new standard for leadership practices. Marcus's replacement as regional director, a woman named Rachel Thompson with 20 years of experience in ethical leadership, had institutionalized many of our innovations. Profit-sharing programs were being implemented at other locations. Employee feedback systems were being redesigned to encourage honest communication. Most importantly, the company had established clear protocols for reporting and addressing workplace abuse. "What you've accomplished here has changed how our entire organization thinks about employee relations," Rachel told me during her quarterly visit. "The evidence is overwhelming. Treating people with dignity and respect produces better results than intimidation and control." The building itself had become a symbol of positive change throughout the business community. Local newspapers had written articles about the transformation. The mayor had recognized our workplace culture initiatives during a public ceremony. Most gratifyingly, several other property owners had contacted me for advice about improving their own tenant relations and building management practices. On the anniversary of Marcus's termination, I organized a celebration for everyone who'd been part of the journey. Carlos brought his entire family to see the building where he now worked as operations director. Jennifer invited colleagues from her previous job who'd expressed interest in working for an organization that valued employee contributions. Tom's wife attended for the first time, having heard so many positive stories about his work environment that she wanted to see it personally. During the celebration, Agent Walker stopped by to provide final updates on Marcus's case. All appeals had been exhausted, and he would serve his complete sentence without possibility of early release. More importantly for our workplace, the investigation had resulted in new federal guidelines for reporting and prosecuting embezzlement in corporate settings. Cases like this one are establishing precedents that protect employees and honest business owners, Agent Walker explained. The evidence you gathered and the courage you showed in coming forward are helping other people in similar situations. As the evening wound down and our guests prepared to leave, I found myself alone in what had once been Marcus's intimidating corner office. The space felt completely different now, brighter, more welcoming, and filled with the positive energy of collaborative work rather than fearful submission. I thought about the scared, powerless secretary who'd discovered those auction documents 9 months earlier. She'd been convinced that challenging authority was impossible, that people like Marcus always won because they held all the power. That woman could never have imagined standing in this office as its owner, surrounded by colleagues who respected her judgment and valued her leadership. The lesson wasn't just about workplace abuse or property ownership or business success. The deeper truth was about recognizing your own worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. For too long, I'd accepted Marcus's treatment because I believed his position gave him the right to define my value. The transformation began when I stopped seeking his approval and started trusting my own assessment of what I deserved. Standing there in this quiet office, looking out over the city lights that sparkled like possibilities, I understood that the most important victory hadn't been buying the building or getting Marcus fired. The real triumph was discovering that I had the strength to stand up for myself and the wisdom to use that strength in service of something larger than revenge. True power isn't about controlling other people or accumulating wealth or achieving positions of authority. True power is about creating environments where everyone can succeed, where dignity is protected, and where people are valued for their contributions rather than their willingness to accept abuse. The scared secretary was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who understood that sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply refusing to accept that things can't get better. As I turned off the lights and locked the building for the night, I smiled, thinking about tomorrow's possibilities. There were more employees to mentor, more positive changes to implement, and more proof to provide that treating people with respect isn't just morally right. It's also the foundation for every kind of success that actually matters. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone in authority was taking advantage of their position to treat you unfairly? What gave you the strength to either stand up for yourself or seek help from others? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, because I believe that sharing these experiences helps all of us recognize that we have more power than we might think. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content about overcoming workplace challenges and building positive professional relationships. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might be facing similar situations. Sometimes knowing that others have successfully fought back can provide the inspiration someone needs to take action in their own life. Thank you so much for listening to my journey from secretary to building owner. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to treat yourself and others. Keep fighting for the respect you deserve, and never underestimate the power of one person's courage to transform an entire environment. Until next time, keep believing in your own strength and the possibility that tomorrow can be better than today.